you guys are at and see what you're thinking. And I think each of you can be proud just how far you've progressed from the beginning. I mean, I can see it even if people didn't have, business plans complete or all of their artist package complete. Still, the way that you're thinking and the things that you did have done and at least started, because sometimes that's the hardest thing, right? Just to start and start putting it down on paper. So I was very, very happy to see where everybody's at. So this month is what we call putting it together. It's at the end, and we're going to be talking about some things that you probably don't usually talk about, like what does it mean when your art is finished, right? Because I think that's a really important point, because it's also relevant when you want to protect your art and get copyright registration, for example, because copyright is about the final product, right? You're going to register the final product. How do you know when you get there? Okay? So when you look at the handouts, there's some quotes here that I want to discuss with you. So the first one is actually from Leonardo da Vinci. And what's interesting about Leonardo da Vinci, because everybody considers him what? The ultimate Renaissance artist, right? What is he known for?
I have a list in my head, so I don't know if I can say it all. Mona Lisa.
No, he didn't do the Sistine Chapel. That was Michelangelo. But what's his very famous painting that everybody knows? The Mona Lisa. The Mona Lisa. And everybody's really surprised that when they see it in person, how small it is. It's not a very big painting at all. Okay? But Leonardo da Vinci did not consider himself an artist. In fact, he wrote a letter to the Duke of Milan asking for a job and telling the Duke, I can create wonderful military weapons and tools. And then he has this little line at the end and says, and I can draw as well as the next guy. But for him, the way that he viewed himself, it wasn't really about being an artist, but more being the creative type, innovating. Okay? So this is what he says. He says, art is never finished, only abandoned. What do you think?
I agree with that perfectly. Sad.
Sad?
Well, I mean, it's a process. It's never finished.
Art is never finished, only abandoned. I see a lot of nods of heads, and I think for many artists that rings true, because when you do your art, is it ever finished? Or do you always see your art and say, I could have done that different. I could fix this. I could have added this color. Let me try it again. And many artists, they actually go back, right, and do that piece of art again, slightly different. But, when you hear it, and I know you said, boy, that sounds kind of sad. It sounds almost drastic to say you abandon it, because the word abandon almost seems so negative, right? You just left it. But why? Think for a minute. Why would art be abandoned in the way that Leonardo is talking?
For me, it's a number of different reasons. One, my creative learning curve for that piece has come to an end. It doesn't hold any more interest for me. And then additionally, it gets to a point where it's overworking. Sometimes an artist, not always, I do it sometimes, some. Keep it simple. As long as it's simple rock and roll versus complicated rock and roll, you have a simple little riff, and you do like a Beatles type ditty as opposed to doing something really complex like a symphony. But it has just as much emotional context. So what's the point of going further? You're just going to overwork it and take away some of that magic.
So let's explore that. Have you had a piece of artwork that you were working on, and then you just kept putting things on, and you figured, oh my God, I ruined it?
Sometimes you get there.
Right, that is just too much. And it's just as hard to know when to stop, right? When to not add that other thing, which takes it from being sort of an organized piece to being one of just clutter, having too much, right? And we have to be careful in today's society, I think, because people are so overly stimulated, aren't they? There's so much going on. It was amazing. I was interviewing somebody for the book I was doing today about digital identity. And when you think about the power of this little thing in our pocket, right? Do you need an encyclopedia anymore? a dictionary, your checkbook, your ID, your passport. I mean, so much that's carried within this one thing, and people really seem to be attached at the hip to it, right? You remember the old American Express advertisement, never leave home without it? Can you leave your home without this?
Yes.
For a day? Okay, more than a day?
You'd be crying
Couple of
after that.
hours?
That's perspective on sin, but anyway.
Right, but it's really interesting if you think about 5 years ago, 3 years ago, we weren't this attached to this thing. What happened?
Consumerism,
Jobs.
Access to what?
Information.
Yeah.
And people having access to you at all times.
that's why they buy on purpose.
Yeah, it's really amazing. So we're getting all this input from this. We're getting all the input from all the billboards, all the input from the people that we meet, the television, the radio. All this stuff is happening. And so sometimes when people also look at art, right? Sometimes if they see too much there, it's just like the noise that they're getting outside, and it gets lost. It gets lost in the noise. Okay? So let me give you another one. None of my works are ever finished. They just stop at interesting places. Now, it sort of works off, you say, well, you lost interest there. And he's saying, well, it's at an interesting point. I didn't lose interest, but it's at an interesting point, I'm going to leave it alone. Right? Have you had that experience with your artwork? Goes someplace you never expected it to go, and then you look back and you say, wow, how did that happen? Where is it coming from? Yeah.
Just out there.
Just out there, right? But somehow you've now expressed it, right? You've put it into a format that others can see, not just you. Okay. It is never quite clear when a work is finished because it can only be finished when the artist can't find anything to improve. Sooner or later, however, it must be done with. What do you think? Do you ever get to the point where you have to put it aside?
I think whoever wrote all those quotes thought about it too long. Because art is not like that.
How is
Not when you're doing stuff because of how you feel. Most artists do because of how they feel. And they feel it's done. Or they get tired. I get tired sometimes. And so that's it.
and
Not
you say
touching
you're
it.
going to do something new?
Yeah, I'm moving
Right.
on.
I think those quotes represent how artists feel, and they'll just happen to be put in
Their
words.
thoughts, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to put it to thoughts. And again, I mean, this is a very narrow theme that we're trying to discuss right now that most artists do not think about, right? It's part of your process with your art. There's a beginning, there's a process, and at some point there's that end.
What's the choice to end it? Because you can always overwork a piece. You can paint over a piece, cover up part of it,
Okay.
in my opinion.
So when do you know the piece is finished?
You don't have anything else left to say or to do or to feel, it's done.
It's done.
We're in
I
that
think-
time. That too.
I think it depends on your standard. Because it's like everybody has their own standard.
Mm-hmm.
Like my standard may be different from somebody else's. I'm like, bar has to look a certain way. And I won't stop until I get to that point. But if it starts getting like bizarre or beyond the standard that I'm set, I'm like, okay, well, I just mess this piece up.
And you let it go.
It depends on the standard.
Have you ever been, and not to use your word, but I am, disturbed by your art?
Yeah.
When you know other people will be,
What was that?
or you know other people will be.
Or you know other people will be disturbed. Okay, so do you keep in mind how people are going to react to your art?
Just a client, definitely.
This is about 7 years ago at college. There was this assignment called, I can't remember exactly what it was like. It was like the story of the human body or whatnot.
And pretty much I took a character, just drew like just a normal human body. Then I it's all digital. I just slice it into 6 sections and just spread them all across the canvas or whatnot, digital canvas, whatever. And I just use a spraying out filter, so it looks like they're all merging into one. And I got the exact reaction I was hoping for when I made it. Complete silence. So, just think about the reaction. It's like I do that.
So it was what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes viewers don't give you what you think they were supposed to respond, or the way that they were supposed to respond, right?
Like something was going through their mind. That's even if it was about me, it was about the work. Just like I just made something that just really
Left
made
them
an impact.
speechless.
Just made an impact, like very positive and negative. I was just like, all right, I did it.
So here's another one. This is one of my favorite artists. His name is Marc Chagall. He is a Jewish artist, and if you've never seen his work, you can Google him. But one of the reasons why I like him, he uses very primary colors, but there's always something floating in his artwork. Chagall is Chagall. When I am finishing a picture, I hold some God-made object up to it, a rock, a flower, the branch of a tree, or my hand, as a final test. If the painting stands up beside a thing man cannot make, the painting is authentic. If there's a clash between the two, it's bad art. So when you finish your art, do you ever look at it and critique it? What do you use as your criteria when you critique it? Now I know Dee was saying he has a standard.
Yeah, I mean, because some people, when they paint things as is. I think it depends on the person's perspective. Because, like, I don't want to paint something as is. I'm like, there's nothing creative about it to me. That's how I feel. Like, I feel like I'm getting a copy machine. But to me, the storytelling or attitude is crazy to me. But that may be different.
And that's your lens, right? That's the incredible thing about art, is how subjective and personal it is, and why, each artist can have their own audience. Miles, you were going to say something.
I'm just over here talking, I'm tired. So I think I was saying.
So what do you think? I mean, he says, I'm going to put this thing that God made, like a flower, I'm going to put it next to the picture. And I'm going to see if they can stand together, right? Now, what do you get from that in terms of something that's made by man versus something that's just natural?
I like the fact that, I don't necessarily agree with the quote, honestly. I know when I like a finished piece, and there's pieces that I've finished that I don't like them. And I tell her, I'm like, and ironically, those are some of the ones that sell sometimes. I'm like, buy it, I'll sell them, just can't get out of here. Because I just don't like looking at it.
There's no love there.
But I allowed it to be created because I let it talk to me and I had interaction with it. And I used what it was presenting and used my own choices, keeping within my own standard of what I thought I had to offer to improve it. But sometimes it just builds on itself and builds a direction. But I like the contrast of man-made versus nature sometimes, as opposed to trying to make them cohesive, even though, to kind of hold within itself, the nature of it is created by man, which is natural. I think man has a natural propensity to create. So in that sense, it's natural anyway. But it has a man-made language and visual power to it that Mother Nature, a tree, can't do it. Wind can do it over thousands of years and do weird stuff, but it can't paint.
I see it a different way. I look at it as this is like his standard, that he only will be completed with a piece when it's as perfected as something that nobody else could have created except God. So for him to see them seamlessly pulled together is more of his test as to whether or not he's done a good enough job.
Okay, so here's another one. How many of you know who Mario Batali is? A very famous chef, right? I'm sorry? Iron Chef America, yes. So if you change the word food to art in this statement, okay? Finishing food or art is about the tiny touches. In the last seconds, you can change everything. Have you ever finished a piece of art and destroyed it? Just did not like, and just said, this is not leaving, nobody is ever going to see this piece, it's gone.
Just cover over with just.
And you cover it over, right?
I used to do it all the time, and then I started dating her, and she committed. She was like, you can't do that anymore. I was like, why not? It's my stuff. She was like, no, you can't do it. So I haven't done that in a while.
What was that emotion, that drive that made you destroy it?
It didn't suit the vision that I had for it initially, before I even put the paint to the canvas. It just didn't fit with what I thought it was gonna look like.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing it more because I couldn't afford new supplies. So if it wasn't up to my standard, I was just paying over. Once I was able to afford new supplies, what it did is it challenged me personally to, and this is a credit to her, it challenged me that if I didn't want anybody to see it, then I damn well better keep working it because something good comes out. Otherwise I'm going to be invested. And there's stuff I have in my studio that I don't like to show. She wants to show them. I'm like, I'm not sure that. I don't think it's up to the level of where we are now, and I don't think it's going to be the way we want it to be. And sometimes I'm wrong, sometimes I suck, sometimes I'm right too.
Okay.
But it challenges me to kind of be.
So this is Dean Cain. Dean Cain is an actor. So if you change the word movie to art in this quote, I like finishing a movie and having this living, breathing thing. I like finishing art and having this living, breathing thing. Would you consider your art alive?
Very much so.
You can't take it back now. So it's like having it. It's like giving birth to something that's totally separate from you in a way, isn't it? I mean, it's very well connected to you, right? Based on the effort that you put in, it's the message that you want to give, but it also takes on a whole life of its own, especially if it's sold.
It interacts with other people.
It interacts with other people.
Either or not, it has a reaction, it has a relationship to other people, and that's what makes it alive. That's what makes it worth something.
Does it speak to everybody? Is it alive for everybody? No, we've discussed here that it might not even be alive for you, right? You have some that you just want to hide away and not have people see it because of that. Okay. I want you to think for a minute about the artwork that you're working on, that you have maybe in your studio, maybe in your home, things that are not finished yet, that you would consider are not finished. Okay? I want you to take a few minutes and write down what needs to be done to make them finished. Okay? What do you need to do to make those pieces finished? And you can also think back in your development plan, you had some goals, right? And some of you were very specific about creating certain pieces of art as one of your goals. What do you need to do to finish that, to accomplish that? And then I want you to think about why haven't you accomplished it? If these are things that you need to finish, what's holding you back? Is it money? Is it time? Is it a creative block? Is it that you have other priorities and this sort of goes towards the end? And then out of those things that have not been finished, think about what would you abandon? If you don't have the money to finish everything, if you don't have the time to finish everything, what would you just say, you know what? I'm not going to finish it. I'm not going to put in any more effort into this.
That's where my anxiety comes in. Because I want to finish all of it. I do sketchbooks and stuff, so I've gotten to the point now where I just combine the different sketches. I'm gonna get a big canvas and I'm gonna get this sketch, that sketch, that sketch. Try to make them meld in one image and see what happens.
Okay, so whatever in your sketchbook has to go to canvas?
Not always. Sometimes I do it on paper. It just kind of depends. Yeah, I do it maybe
So
some
you
of
feel
it.
it.
But I'll go back 5 years in my sketchbook and do something new, but then I add everything that happened to me since then into the image again.
Now, Tamika, you said something, when he talked about anxiety, you said, yeah. Why?
I don't know, because I guess, like going back to look at things that I didn't like when I stopped working on them. It's like, oh, I gotta go back and look at this thing. And I have to rethink of what I want it to be now.
Why do you have to go back?
I don't have to, but, if I wanted to complete the piece, I'd have to revisit it. But the desire to do that might not be there anymore. So now it's a chore.
That's well put. I can agree with that perfectly.
So now it's a chore, so now it's a burden, so now it is a source of stress. Jason, you said it was.
I think that comes from pushing it too hard, like trying to make it happen. I have a saying, I write poetry also, and I have a saying that there's a poem in me or a piece of art in me, but I haven't lived it yet. And that's the reason why I haven't done it yet, because something has to happen in order for me to, get to that point. Maybe I need to see something or experience something, read something, go to the movie, whatever. And there's something that'll pull that extra thing, out of me. I have formed parts of it formed in my mind, and then when I sit down, sometimes it all comes to me, and then it'll just be a finished piece. But sometimes all the fragments haven't come together yet.
So you have this.
That's deep too.
Interesting. That's interesting. I mean, we do have some artists that they take the approach that this is like my job. I go in the studio for a certain amount of hours and I will paint. Writers do this as well. They'll go into their office and they'll just sit there, right? They won't get up from the desk. They have this thing that if they're not sitting at the desk, then they're not going to be able to write. And then there are other artists and authors that say, you know what, I'll work when it comes to me. Right? I'm not going to sit there at the studio because it's just not going to happen. Versus the other people say, no, if you're not there, then you're not going to get inspired, right? If you're there in the studio, if you're there in this environment with the paintbrushes, it'll inspire you to do work. Other people can't do that. They have to wait for that moment. I love the way you said, it's in me, but I haven't lived it yet, right? Because I think that's the other part of art being so subjective and personal, right? You're all trying to get a message out, but it hasn't happened yet. Michelangelo would say of the marble, when they asked him, well, how do you know what to carve? And he would say, the marble tells me. Right? I just have to listen, and then I will bring out what's ever inside. Okay, so I think that's a very nicely put, Jason. Thank you. Okay. One of the things, though, to keep in mind is from a business standpoint, a business person tries to eliminate obstacles, right? Tries to get rid of inefficiencies. And stress is a very big obstacle, isn't it? But one of the things we just discussed here is that stress is something that we're putting on ourselves, isn't it? We're saying we have to go back and finish it. We're saying we have to go back and make sure that it's done. We're saying, what if we change that? What if we said, okay, I will work on it to a certain point, and then I need to let it go for a while? Okay, how many of you have little kids? Nieces and nephews? When kids are really small, it amazed me. Christmas time would come, and when they're really small, they don't care about the toy, they care about the box.
Yeah.
They want to get in the box, they want to play with the paper, they put the bows on their head. That's what it is, right? You spent all this money on the latest toys, they don't care, okay? You can give them an empty box and they're happy, okay? Because they think that's the gift, the box. When they get about 3, 4, 5, 6, then they're really looking at the toy, right? But how long do they play with the toy?
Right.
Yeah, that morning and that's it, right? So my mom tells me the story that what she would do is she would give us our gifts, and then after a few months she would put the gifts away, right? And then after a few months she would pack them up again and give them back to us. We thought we were getting new gifts. It's the same toy. Right? But from the kid's standpoint, it's like, oh, yay, this is great. We got new gift toys, right? But it's the same thing. It's just that our mind, our attention span has changed. You can do that with your art. Instead of keeping it in your mind, I gotta do, put it away. You don't have to put it away forever, right? But you can certainly get it out of the room, right? Clear your thoughts so that you can get done what you can get done. So that you can get some pieces sold, right? Be at that art show, do that exhibit. Instead of being in the studio or in your home trying to finish a piece that is just not going to happen. Because many times when we force ourselves, it doesn't work. And we end up with something that's not up to our standard. Right? Now it's different when we have a commission, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Right? Because at that point, it's not us who's saying it's finished. It's somebody else who's saying it's finished. And that's why for a lot of artists, commissions are difficult. Right? Because you have this, again, a pressure that's put on you because it has to be done by a certain time. And you know what? When you negotiate commissions, they will ask, well, how much time do you need? And in the beginning, you as the artist can usually give them a certain time frame. So think carefully about the time frame you give them. And if you can, add a month or two at the end. Because things happen. Life happens, right?
Under promise, over deliver.
But then most artists, what will happen is they say, okay, I've got 10 months to do this. 8 months pass by. Right? Because life is happening. All of a sudden, now they're really stressed because they got 2 months left. Right? So you got to take commissions in a different process, don't you? It's like that homework you never wanted to do at school. Yeah.
I was curious, just touching on what you were talking about there. When I was doing a lot of my work, I figured out there's two things I could do. With commissions, I was able to convince myself that it was an artistic challenge, that it could be a new avenue for me. It's their idea, and it took it as a learning experience as opposed to me just, oh, I'm gonna do it. And so I would go about it and convince myself that this is a challenge, maybe I'll learn something new here. So I made it my own piece. So I didn't have to really put too much pressure on me about what they were going to think, because they hired me for a reason. And then secondly, with the one piece, trying to force one piece at one time, I got in the habit of buying multiple canvases at once, where I would start various ideas, and then anytime I went to the studio, to go be in the presence of the work, like you said, just sit there and look at it for a little while and kind of feel whatever mood I was in, I could just blab on them and start working on it, as opposed to having to force myself to work on one piece, maybe having a different emotional context.
Yeah, that's a great thing that you brought up. Repeat the first part of the first one.
Changing my mindset about the creation.
Attitude is so important in anything that we do, whether it's our art, whether it's, doing the homework, whether it's, writing a business plan. And changing the mindset can make a big difference, right? Trying to make it positive instead of, oh, I have to do this. Making it into a personal challenge, for example, because when we face our challenges, at the end of the day, we then feel a real sense of accomplishment. Okay, so I am vertically challenged, right? And I always say God did that because I'm afraid of heights. Well, last year, I try to give myself a personal challenge every year. Last year, my personal challenge was I was going to go up in a hot air balloon. I did. Callaway Garden has a hot air balloon festival, okay, every year. So I went on it. Now, some people say I cheated because the hot air balloon was tethered. It went up and it came down.
But you did go up.
Okay, but I went up, right? Wasn't that the point that I went up? And sometimes, that's the way you look at it. What was my challenge? Get on a hot air balloon. It was tethered, but I still went up.
Baby
Right?
steps.
It's the baby steps. Sometimes that's how you have to almost fool yourself to get to that next level. And you're not lying to yourself. You're just getting yourself a little bit of motivation to get to that next step, okay? But do keep in mind that sometimes these stresses are artificial, that we're putting them on ourselves when we don't need to. Okay? I am a workaholic. I could work all day, all weekend, I now have a life, but before I would just work. Okay? And it took me a long time to figure out, hey, I don't have to work 24/7. I can actually enjoy my life. But I was putting all of this stress on myself for no reason. And we do this to ourselves all the time. And I've had to learn to look at it and say, does it really have to be done by then? Most of the time, no. Most of the time, we don't have to push ourselves to that point. Okay? I also like your idea that you brought up of having multiple projects open and being able to switch, because are you always in the mood to do one thing?
No.
Sometimes people can really focus in on one thing. Sometimes people need a break from something. Okay? Fresh air is really important. They've done studies about if you have light in the room you work in or if you don't, how that makes a difference. If you take a break and get up and just walk out the door for a few minutes and just get some fresh air, or even open the window, that can make a difference. It can refresh you. They talk about aromatherapy, right? Lemon is supposed to wake you up. Orange is supposed to wake you up. Lavender will put you to sleep.
Coca-Cola.
There might be things in your environment that stimulate you or stress you out or puts you in the right mood. I know people, they have to have all the lights off. They can only work in natural light. You go there, you're like squinting. Huh?
Which job industry is this? So what job industry?
All different kinds. I've seen artists, I've seen office people. For some reason, they just don't like artificial lighting. So they work best when they're there. There are some people who need some kind of music, right, an ambiance in order to get them in the mood. Or you do. What kind of music is the best for you?
Jazz, mostly jazz, hip hop, reggae.
Does the music change your art?
But a lot, definitely.
Yeah?
In fact, most of the artwork that I do, I was inspired by a song. And I have the song on repeat while I'm working on it. Keep in mind I have OCD too, so that's kind of bad about doing things in repetition. So that's kind of a habit I've tried to break, but the more artwork I do, the harder it is to break because it kind of works along with that. So I have this song that's stuck in my mind, and I feel like images just off of the music, and then I just keep playing it until I get whatever I get out of it, and I get burned out on that song, and I go to something else. So most pieces that you've seen of mine, some music some song or whatever, or a collection of songs, or album, is what
Has
inspired.
inspired.
Right.
That's inspired.
I think I want to add in that, to, you can't oversimplify stuff for artists because it's art is a part of your character, and however the person is, if they're neurotic, the art is going to be neurotic. Their methods are going to be neurotic. If they're calm, chill out people, then that's going to be what they're looking for when they express themselves and do their art. So there are methods for us to play with our mind and say, let me just knock this out now, and not force yourself, but say, I have this power, I have the control, I can do it. But ultimately, the fun part of being an artist is that we're all do it differently, and we have to have all these different things. Otherwise, we're not doing it. That's the fun part of being an artist.
So when you say we have
Otherwise,
to have all these different things, what things?
anything, if you have to have the music, if you have to have the darkness, if you have to have natural light, if you have to have, be funky for 2 days and not bathe and sit there and paint, because if it was as simple as just clocking in and working, then that's a job.
Right.
And we don't want that. Well, we already do not want that. So it's going to be what we want it to be. So maybe sometimes we do have to be stressed out. I know I procrastinate. I wait to the last minute. Sometimes it's because I know what I want to accomplish, but I don't see it yet. It doesn't happen. And sometimes the pressure makes it happen. It just somehow that's how it works. I don't know why. And sometimes I'm inspired and I've already been planning, like Jason said, there's elements that I've put together and I said one day I want to do this, and then the time comes, it's like, oh, I know what I'm going to put together.
It happens.
But a lot of the times, the majority, 90% of the time, is the stress. And you're like, I need that rest of that money, the balance. So, it's gonna happen. We're gonna do this. So anyways, I just wanted to add that part up.
Yeah, and there's one quote from Picasso I think it's Picasso, said, work comes from work. And so I kind of took that to heart when I was in college, and it was like, so that's why I started doing multiple canvases. And the more I worked, I would learn something on that canvas, and I'm like, it was like he was saying, I would just put it in the background and put it in my sketchbook, and I'm gonna remember that. And then topic or commission would come in sometimes, like, can you do a drawing like this? And I was like, I got this the thing. And I'll do my sketchbooks, and then I'll go back and do it, and it's something I learned from there. So that work came from work, and it made the stress really dissipate for me too.
And I think,
all those ideas just cataloged in the sketchbook.
yeah, and I think it is important to acknowledge how you are and what your style is. And I'll give you an example that's still being debated today, Van Gogh. Okay, so everybody knows who Vincent Van Gogh is, right? The artist who cut off his ear. And he's the one who did Starry Night. And if you look at his art, is there anybody here who does not know who Van Gogh is or doesn't know what his art is? You don't know, Michelle? Okay. But, there's a debate right now as to whether his brushstrokes was his style or was because of his mental illness.
And does that really make a difference? Do we care?
But
Artists
that's
don't
the point.
care. It's the critics may, and
That's
these people
right.
who try to think about this stuff.
And that's the point that I wanted to get across. It doesn't matter,
Yeah.
right? The analysis that happens later on,
Right.
it's what that artist produced, what they're thinking, what they're going through. Yes, Michelle?
So that's, are they drawing that from that particular piece?
No, from his work and from his biography, from what they know of his life. And, some people say, well, it's that crazy because, he cut off his ear. He's got to be crazy. Right? And
The absence repair, and then there's a rumor that he also drank his paint water. Because the paints back then, they were toxic. I read that actually.
We were thirsty that day.
In absence, you drink a lot of absence.
well, Alice in Wonderland, that character of the Mad Hatter, it's based on the fact that the people who made those kind of hats used magnesium, and that's poisonous, that's toxic. It would make you mentally ill.
We put it in your hats.
And they would put it in the hat to make it shiny and be able to, you know, format it the way they needed it. So that's where Mad Hatter comes from.
Yeah, I was sort of like Mercury, it just seems
Or it's the Mercury instead of the magnesium. It's one of those that they use. But that's where it comes from. It was a very, very real concept. So, you know, back then they didn't know all of the consequences to all these things that they were doing.
And we still don't today.
But today, supposedly, we have all this knowledge, right? Back then,
But it's still our
Right, but looking at
opinion.
stuff like this, they'll be saying the same thing about
Yeah,
us.
and it's all opinion.
There's still new technology that's created today that we think is great for us, but it's.
I would
But we
pay
just
that.
don't look at it.
I would, see what I pay.
has there been a piece of art that you just said, how is that art? That you've seen and you just said, I can't believe that that's being considered art.
Yep, all the time.
I used to,
there was a movie, I think,
You used to, not anymore.
man,
Why not?
cause I'm understanding, like, with a lot of these art collectors and stuff, I mean, they're into like energy and stuff like that, like colors, brushstrokes, the type of energy they have. And I was realizing, I was like, well, obviously, it must be real, because there's some people who have been doing art for years, and they're into it, and they will do 3 brushstrokes on a canvas and sell it for $1 million. Opposed to some cat who doesn't really care about art, he's a lot to do the same thing. He'll do it and nobody will buy it. So I really believe in energy when it comes to
Okay.
that.
Paul?
I think 2 things, like first that famous example, the toilet, where,
Yeah.
that's just
The
set.
shower.
But another thing I was just thinking about, I mean, like, has anybody here seen, the other guys? Was it Will Ferrell and, Mark Wahlberg?
Yeah, where they're the
There's-
cops.
Yeah, there's that
They're the
one,
phony cops.
yeah, there's that one scene where one of them crashes they crash an art show, and there's that, what was it, a coffee table artwork, where it's just all that stuff spread out and whatnot. And it's like, one of the cops was just like, it's just a coffee table, it's like, no, the art is that, it's the chaos of the coffee table, where people just put anything on it and whatnot. And I'm just thinking like, what was got a coffee table, just like spread a whole bunch of stuff and just called that art. And the ironic of that, and the irony of that explanation was that to mess with all the other artists, one of the cops just picked up a spoon and moved it over just an inch, and everybody freaked out. Like,
Well,
really?
Everybody here knows the show The Apprentice, right? So they have the Celebrity Apprentice.
Yep.
So they had this one episode where they needed to create art and sell it for charity,
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
right? And so the more money, whoever sold the most and raised the most money won the challenge. Okay, so they have these art openings and you look at the art and you say, what makes that worth $500,000?
The person who got the money to pay for it.
Perception. It's all about perception.
His sales.
A bit of a little bit of all of this, but mainly it was the celebrity who made it. And nothing to do with whether they had the talent of an artist, it was their name. Right, so LaToya Jackson took a t-shirt that she had from her brother Michael, supposedly there were only 2 t-shirts ever made. And she cut it up and she put a piece of it on a cap. And that was her art. And it sold for $100,000.
Should have Michael
But that
Jackson's
wasn't
face.
even LaToya's name, it was Michael Jackson's.
Right.
Which I think is.
Should have been her nephew's
There you go, you put that shirt.
Could have been her nephew's shirt, yeah. It might not even have been hers, but you know, it was there.
There's actually a friend of mine in my art school that did that. We had to do a semester long painting along our regular classwork. And we just said, you know, 8 months or 6 months, whatever it was, we all waited till like the last month or 2, and that's when I started doing mine. And I did an all right job, I did this weird clown thing or whatever. But anyway, he did nothing. I know he didn't do anything, because I knew him. So he
You
walked
were
in.
there.
He walked in, and he had this little meat square canvas, and he had a little bag of ashes. And he put some glue in it, just mashed it on the wall, and teacher gave him an A. He gave me like a D. I'm lost my shit. I was like, that's bullshit. I
Especially in art school, they try to like.
As I saw him doing the glue, like it was still kind of wet when he put it on the wall. And all he said was that, and the teacher asked him about it, and the only reason that the teacher gave him an A, he said, is because he told him a story about the piece. He said, oh, I did this piece, and I did it all semester, and I didn't like it, so I burned it, and I put some of the ashes on the canvas. I was like, that's BS.
And that's, if we go right back to our first session, the story sells the art. Whether it's for money or a grade, the story sells the art.
I wanted to punch him, but I couldn't.
Did you?
No, I told him I wanted to.
Okay, so to help us not procrastinate, we're going to do some in-classroom work today. We have a couple things that we need to prepare. The next time we meet here in class, each of you is going to present your business.
In what context? Presenting in, like, we're trying to sell it, that's what I think. We're trying to present
Your business. You've got 10 minutes to present your business. Notice I did not say to present your art. You can do whatever you want. You got 10 minutes.
Do a presentation.
Okay? To present your business. Okay. Interesting. And after that, we have our art exhibit. Now, Dan has said that the art exhibit is called
Me, Myself, and I.
Me, Myself, and I.
It's your stuff. It's your art.
Okay? So what I want us to do for the next half an hour, and you can work in partnership or you can work alone, I want you to lay out your exhibit. I want to know what pieces you're going to present in that exhibit. Even if you don't have them yet, I want you to think about what you want to have there. What are the captions? What makes it relevant to the theme of me, myself, and I? Okay? So it is 7:15. Our first session is going to last half an hour. At 7:45, we're going to start talking about our exhibits. Okay? Okay. We can turn off the recording for now.
Get to it.